Elewa katiba jenga nchi yako. Elewa katiba jenga nchi yako. K-Nice inakufafanulia. Katiba nawe jenga nchi yako. Ni wakati wa kujinice na K-Nice uielewe. Katiba nawe jenga nchi yako.
A very good evening to you and welcome to the Kenya National Integrated Civic Education on Devolution. I'm Liz Ntonjira. Now, the structure of the devolved government in Kenya revolves principally on the exercise of power at two levels, the national government and the 47 county governments. However, the constitution anticipates lower level units of devolution and also requires state organs to decentralize their operation as is appropriate and feasible. To help us understand better the structure and governance of the devolved government and how citizens can engage in this transition and intergovernmental relations is Joash Dache, the Chief Executive Officer of the Kenya Law Reforms Commission, and Dr. Collins Odote, the Senior Lecturer, University of Nairobi. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz.
I think I'll start with the most basic question, how a devolved government will help our nation since we are transitioning.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that question, Liz. The question of how the system of devolved government is going to help Kenya as a nation goes to the very basis of why we promulgated the new constitution. Because remember, in the previous dispensation, we had a centralized system of government. The closest we came to devolution were local authorities. But our constitution makes devolution as one of the national values and principles and Article 10. Then we may want to answer, what then is devolution? Or what then is a system of devolved government that we have adopted as a country? I want to break this down. Devolution basically means the extent to which the traditional powers of the state have been dispersed to other levels of government or centralized. Which are these traditional powers of the state and government? The power to tax, you know, the power to spend, the power to enforce rights, the power to deliver services, the power to distribute or control resources. The extent to which these traditional powers of the state and government have been dispersed or centralized is devolution. In Kenya, we have devolved government functions and resources to two levels of government, the national government and county government. So if someone was to ask you today, how many governments do you have in Kenya? There are 48. But does it mean that we have little 47 countries within Kenya? No. The system of devolved government that we have adopted in our constitution is that of cooperative government, local government at the county level, and shared governance at the national level. That is why the constitution demands that the two levels of government conduct their mutual relations in a manner that promotes consultation and cooperation.
Okay. Now, Dr. Odote, are you of the opinion that this devolved system of government will ensure equitable resources, distribution of resources, before we even get to the structure of the devolved government?
Liz, it has to. And it has to because of the manner in which it is designed. You know, in the past, two things used to happen which made equity difficult. The first thing that used to happen is government was very far from people. So government was largely based in Nairobi. And resources were distributed and managed from Nairobi. So even when you had local authorities that Dache talks about, the resources for those local authorities came from and were managed by Nairobi. Now the system we have is such that the amounts of money that goes to each of the counties is predetermined by the constitution in terms of the way in which it's being distributed. We know that at least 15% of national revenue has to go to each of the 47 counties, and the criteria for distribution is already discussed and agreed upon by the Commission on Revenue Allocation. So you'll get money based on your poverty levels, you'll get money based on your population, and you'll get money based on your landmark. So that then means that people will get slightly equal amounts. But two is in terms of the manners in which those monies are then utilized. The manners in which they're then utilized are determined and controlled by people elected at the lower level. You have your governor and you have your county assembly member. So that then means that in terms of how monies are then dealt with, they're dealt with that lower level. The third is the constitution then contemplates that there are some areas that are less developed than others. And for those that are extremely poor, there's the equalization fund, essentially supposed to promote equity. So the short answer to your question is the design of the constitution is essentially to promote equitable development. In fact, that is one of the main reasons why we have adopted a devolved system of government.
All right. Now, to break down the various roles of the leaders involved in the county system, I know during elections people did vote for governors, senators, and women rep, but then when they got to the county, the ward representative, everybody was in a daze, most of the people, because they don't understand the structure. Maybe if we could begin with the structure.
Okay. Consider the traditional arms of government. There are normally three. You have the executive, the legislature, the judiciary. That's what we have at the national government level. At the county government level, you have the county executive and the county assembly, which means there's one arm of government that you have not devolved. That's the judiciary. So at the county level, you only have the county executive and the county assembly. At the national level, you have the three traditional arms. We have not devolved the judiciary because the judiciary remains one of the shared institutions between the two levels of government. In terms of structure, the same way that we have the president heading the national executive, at the county level, you have the governor heading the county executive. The governor, of course, with the deputy governor who was their running mate. And then you have the governor's executive committee. This is basically the small cabinet of the governor. Below the members of the executive committee, I remember the other day Governor Kidero nominated 10 prominent Nairobians to be in the executive committee. Below the executive committee, you have the chief officers. These are basically the technical people, the equivalent of principal secretaries at the national level. Then below that, you have various technical heads of departments. Other than that executive arm of the county government, you also have the county assembly. These are the ward representatives. These are the people that we have elected from wards to sit in the county assemblies. And these are not councillors, because these are people who are going to make legislation that is going to govern the affairs of the county. There's a third element or structure in the county government. The same way we have the National Public Service Commission, we have county public service boards that is going to deal with personnel issues, establishment and abolition of offices, appointing people to those offices. This is not the responsibility of the governor, at least below the chief officer level. There's going to be the 47 county public service boards to undertake this responsibility. Other than at the county level, we talked about the county level, you have decentralized units below the county. You have sub-counties, which are modeled along constituency lines, headed by sub-county administrators appointed by the county government. Below that, you have wards headed by ward administrators. Then below that, you have villages headed by village administrators, all appointed by the county government. That is how it's going to work. The governor is going to appoint the same way the president appoints national government officials, and then the county assembly approves. The governor nominates, the county assembly approves. The same way President Kenyatta nominated cabinet secretaries the other day, and the National Assembly vetted and approved, and then he has formally appointed them. It's the same structure that is going to happen at the county level.
All right, then this begs to ask the question, what is the role of county commissioners? Are their roles overlapping? Dr. Odote?
I think an interesting question, and a question that has generated a lot of heat and sometimes very little light. I think the point to note is, and Dache made this point, that we are one country. We aren't 48 countries. And in that one country, we have two levels, the national level and the county level, each with distinct functions. If you go to the 4th schedule, you'll see there are functions of national government, and there are also functions of county government. Where does the national government operate? It does not operate in Nairobi. It operates across the entire country. The whole country is divided into counties. So it means that at every county there will be a representative of the national government in that county. The one function that has also remained, in addition to judicial functions with the national government, is the function of security. So security functions is a function of the national government. So there must be a representative of the national government at the county level. And that's the function that the county commissioners were supposed to be performing. I think the challenge, in my view, is not so much whether county commissioners will exist or not. The challenge is what is going to be the relationship between the county commissioner and the governor.
So will they still continue being in existence?
I think there is a law that has actually established now the county commissioners. The debate about their constitutionality or not has been resolved through a law. I think the debate is going to be, and that's what's going to be harmonized, to ensure that the county commissioners, in whatever name called, when they exist at the counties, there's harmonious relationships between them and the governor. I think that is a critical thing, because as I was saying sometimes last week, although the functions of security is the functions of the national government, the effectiveness of security requires cooperation of the governor. Because if you as a governor, you don't know how security is operating, you'll not be able to carry out work well. But also if you're a county commissioner, if you don't cooperate with the governor, then your security functions will be hampered. Because how agriculture is regulated impacts on security. So I think the point for people to note is what is important is for us to be able to create greater harmony between county commissioners and governors. And at least, thankfully, a month down the road, the fights that existed between county commissioners and governors is less and is reducing. And I think that's what we need to focus on.
Okay, I'm sure someone working in the local authority and is watching this program is wondering, so once this devolved system or government is formed, will I lose my job or where do I lie?
That's a pertinent question. And not just us here grappling with it, but there are people who are actually affected by the system that we have adopted. But I wanted to point out that Section 138 of the County Governments Act provides that national public officers who are performing devolved functions, which have since been assigned to county governments at the county level, shall immediately the results of the last general elections were declared, are deemed seconded to county governments, which means basically that all those district planning heads, veterinary heads, agriculture heads, wherever they were at the district level, are deemed seconded to county government, because the functions that they were performing in the previous dispensation have since been devolved. For employees of local authorities, the situation is slightly different. The County Governments Act repealed Cap 265, that is the Local Government Act, under which employees of local authorities operated. And the County Governments Act and even the Urban Areas and Cities Act, which we enacted about 2 years ago, provide that immediately after the results of the general elections are declared, then employees or persons who are working in the former local authorities shall be deemed to be employees of county governments. So basically, no one has lost their jobs. But we must remember,
which is quite a relief for them to hear that.
No one has lost their job. Obviously, there will be rationalization.
Okay.
But the Constitution itself also protects public servants. And even former employees of former local authorities were public servants.
Okay, brilliant. We will get more into that, but now let's take a short break. Remember, you are watching the Kenya National Integrated Civic Education Program, and we're talking about devolution.
Elewa katiba jenga nchi yako. Elewa katiba jenga nchi yako. K-Nice inakufafanulia. Katiba nawe jenga nchi yako. Ni wakati wa kujinice na K-Nice uielewe. Katiba nawe jenga nchi yako.
Welcome back to the program. We are talking about the devolved system of government. And remember, if you have any queries about devolution, you could always go to www.knice.go.ke, and also you could use the Twitter handle at KNice Kenya and also the Facebook page of KNice Kenya. Going back to our discussion, so does this mean that the devolution only happens at the county level?
Not really. Let's remember that there are principles, there are objects of devolution. One of the objects under Article 174 is to ensure that national state organs decentralize their services from the capital, that is Nairobi, and therefore it does not only mean that devolution happens at the county level. Again, county governments are required to ensure that they decentralize their services to the lowest levels possible. That is why I indicated that below the county, there is a sub-county, ward, village, and then there are urban areas and cities, which are also agencies of county governments. But before we took the break, Dr. Odote was talking about the legality or constitutionality of the county commissioners.
Exactly.
It is a given that there are obvious overlaps between the role of county commissioners and the structures in the devolved system of government. And the explanation is that the National Government Coordination Act 2013, which then gives legitimacy to county commissioners and all these people below them, was among the last pieces of legislation that the 10th Parliament passed. Remember the famous midnight bills to beat certain constitutional deadlines. So this obviously caused overlaps between the National Government Coordination Act and the County Governments Act, which defines the structure of county governments. But as a Law Reform Commission, together with CIC, Transition Authority, and the Office of the Attorney General, we are currently undertaking an audit of all those legislation impacting on devolution with a view to removing the unnecessary conflicts. But to the broader point, whether county governments are in office legitimately or legally, we know that the Court of Appeal is ruling next week. We may not want to speculate how the Court of Appeal is going to rule. But remember, someone can still actually go up to the Supreme Court before this matter is finally sorted out. But going forward, this would be my suggestion. There's a provision in the Constitution and Article 187 on transfer of functions between the two levels of government to avoid unnecessary conflicts. Because remember, registration of births and deaths is a national government function. Why can't the national government agree with the county governments that you'll do for us taking of this data and then transmitting it to Nairobi or upwards, so that you avoid a situation where the sub-chief, the chief, and then the ward administrator, and then the village administrator appointed by county government and the national government respectively do the same, basically the same thing. So we would suggest that both levels of government use Article 187, which allows for transfer of functions between the two levels of government based on mutual agreements. Right. The same applies to primary education. Primary education is a national government function, yet we know that you cannot possibly remove county governments from development of infrastructure, of schools, you know, at that level. Take the example of Nairobi City County, where most of the schools in Nairobi used to belong to the old Nairobi City Council, yet primary education is a national government function. The county government of Nairobi and the national government can actually enter into an agreement, a mutually agreed agreement, that primary school function will be transferred to Nairobi county government for the time being. But of course, there are conditions which must be followed when you transfer functions. The principle of resources must follow functions. So if you transfer a function, whether by the national government or county government, then resources aligned to that function must also be transferred.
All right. And speaking about conflicts, we know they are bound to happen. What will be done to manage conflicts between the national and the county government?
Thanks, Liz. I think the the point to note about how conflicts are going to be managed stems from what Joash has talked about, the transfer function. I think the critical thing is about mutual relations based on consultations and based on respect. If both levels of government realize that whether a function is ours or not, we can only succeed if we do it in cooperation with the other. That, I think, is the starting point. And that's why he was saying, if you have functions of primary education, like the national government, and the reality, like if you come to Nairobi, is that city schools are county governments, as opposed to having a fight as to whose function it is, why don't you enter into an arrangement which enables primary education still to be given to the people of Nairobi? And if you take that to in terms of how to deal with conflicts, I think the first level of dealing with conflicts is in terms of conversations and in terms of trying to resolve those conflicts amicably. So when there's a dispute between the national and the county level, what the law encourages is consultations, the law encourages dialogue, it encourages alternative dispute resolution mechanism, because the law contemplates that going to court as the two levels of government is not the best way of solving a dispute that arises between you. You can go to court, the law allows you, but only as a last resort. And that's why there have been there are several institutions that have been created to enable you to resolve those disputes, including the summit between the president and the governors. There's a summit chaired by the president, whose deputy is then somebody who's been elected by the governors. Currently is the governor for Bomet, Honorable Isaac Ruto, and his duty is to meet and resolve things. You saw just a few days after governors were sworn in, when they went to Naivasha, and there was the unfortunate dispute concerning whether we are a unitary state or not. A week later, the governors actually met with President Kenyatta in State House to try and resolve things. That is supposed to happen once the structures are set under the auspices of the summits of governors and the president to resolve things. Secondly, it's also contemplated that there are going to be sometimes disputes between two counties, not necessarily just between the national government and the county government. And there is a council of governors which also meets at least twice a year, essentially to ask ourselves what are the progress that are taking place, but also if there's then disputes between two or more counties, that entity can be able to resolve it. And to support it, their technical committees are able to support it. In addition, the cabinet secretary for different sectors also has the responsibility for meeting with their counterparts in charge of things. So there might be a debate concerning health, and that's one of the critical things, because some people, there was the debate with the former Minister of Health as to whether former provincial referral hospitals should be made national hospitals, should remain to the county, and you expect that there are going to be tough force around that. You want to be sure that the cabinet secretary responsible for health issues is going to meet with their counterparts in charge of health across the entire country to be able to ensure that these disputes are held. Because at the end of the day, what Kenyans want, they want services to be given to them. Kenyans honestly don't care whether health is provided for by the national government or by the county government. They just want to be sure that the government provides health. And I think that's why the requirement for intergovernmental relations is for consultations, is for mutual respect. If you can't be able to resolve them through those mechanisms, you are also then allowed to have a mechanism for mediation. You will appoint a mediator between the two levels to try and help you resolve things. So I think the critical thing is the essence of dialogue, the essence of consultation, and the essence of consensus building in trying to resolve disputes.
All right.
Absolutely, Liz. That's why the creation of the Ministry of Devolution and Planning by President Kenyatta is very critical, because someone must be in charge of policy issues around intergovernmental relations. And that person is the cabinet secretary responsible for matters relating to devolution.
All right. Now, the Transition Authority is tasked with the role of ensuring to oversee a smooth transition of this devolved system. Do you think it has been able to carry out its mandate effectively?
I'll take on this, Liz, because I have an interest in this matter. I'm a member of the Transition Authority. I represent, I'm an alternate to P.S. Kibara of Justice, so I sit in the Transition Authority. And I wanted
So have you been able to execute your mandate?
I wanted to remind Kenyans, something happened after 4th of March. We saw for the first time the 47 county assembly members met, throughout the country, in each county, and they were sworn in, and they elected a speaker on the same day. Immediately after that, a week later, 47 governors were sworn in across the country with the judges presiding over the swearing-in ceremonies. Someone must have arranged for that to take place without hitches. That is what the Transitional Authority did. Other than generally midwifing the transition process, the Transitional Authority has very critical and important functions that it has that it's been executing. One, there's what we call functional analysis and transfer of functions. Remember, sometimes in February, the Transitional Authority gazetted certain functions with the county governments assumed immediately governors were sworn into office. These were functions which were formerly being done by former local authorities. Transitional Authority is also responsible for the issue of audit of assets. Remember, previously, public assets were owned by the central government and local authorities. The Transitional Authority is currently taking an audit of all assets of both levels of government with a view to allocating these assets to which level of government is best suited to own them. Again, the issue of human resource staff, former employees of local authorities or national government employees working at the county level is the responsibility of the TA, and we have been doing this together with the Public Service Commission to deploy this staff. The TA also has responsibility for civic education. As a matter of fact, the TA has conducted induction workshops for governors, speakers of county assemblies, county assembly members throughout the country. We are currently doing from Sunday, we are going to undertake capacity assessment, readiness of county governments to assume their full responsibilities from 1st of July. So a lot of work is happening there, and we are happy that we are able to come to this public forum and tell Kenyans what we are doing as Transitional Authority.
Yesterday I was at the Senate, and some senators were asking that, by the way, do we need the Transition Authority now that we have the Cabinet Secretary in charge of devolution of planning? And I think the reason why they were raising the debate is the same question that you're asking. And has the Transition Authority done its work effective? I think, for me, we need to put the debate different one. Is that, do we need the Transition Authority? I think that's the bigger question.
Do you feel we need one?
I think we need the Transition Authority, because the Transition Authority is in charge of transition. You know, we have two levels of government, national and county. In this transition process, who will ensure that there is a seamless transfer? Because all the functions have initially been performed by the central government and the national, which is an interested party. Yeah. Who will be there to ensure that this process is seamless?
Without bias.
Without bias. And when there was a debate between Treasury and governors concerning resources, who would they complain to? The same Treasury? You need somebody to say that it is your mandate to ensure you do this. So whether they have done their work perfectly or not, I think there's room for improvement in terms of what the Transition Authority has done. But they need to be there to undertake those functions. Today, I was in a capacity building forum for county assembly members of Kajiado. And we are going through their roles as county assembly members. We're going through the standing orders and how they can be able to customize them. They have interim standing orders. Who has prepared those interim standing orders? The Transition Authority. Absolutely. If it wasn't there, they would be starting from a clean slate. Yesterday, the Senate passed a motion for the national government to be able to assume all the debts of the former county council. We need to know how much those debts are. Yep. It is the legal mandate of the Transition Authority to be able to perform those kind of things. So I think they have a role to play over the next 3 years to ensure that the challenges and the conflicts you are raising, which will occur, when they do, are resolved in a manner that is amicable and they don't derail the process of devolution.
All right, we've spoken expansively about various bodies and organizations and their role in devolution. Let's talk about the Mwananchi. What is my role in devolution?
I think citizens have the greatest responsibility to ensure devolution works. You know, every time politicians are campaigning, they make the statement that we are the people. And it is because Article 1 of the Constitution, talking about sovereignty, says sovereign power rests with the people of Kenya. It then means that if devolution is to work, then we must be at the center of looking and participating in the process. And that's why participation is a principle of national governance. So the first thing that we must do as citizens is to participate in the process of devolution, fundamental. And what does participation mean? Participation means, for example, that number one, when there are opportunities, when there are functions, when there is a budget hearing called by the governor, you go out and give your views. Because if you don't, the governor will go ahead and present something anyway, and they will be saying, this is what the people have said. If the people don't speak, they will go ahead. But number two, once they give a budget, it's our duty as citizens to monitor what is going on. So when there's a county assembly hearing, find time, go to the county assembly, present your petitions, listen to the debates, look for your ward representative, engage them, look for the county executive committee members, engage them. When budgets are presented, look at the budget and analyze it and ask yourself, for me, the priority for my ward is health. How much money has been allocated to health? If you think more needs to be allocated, go for budget hearings and demand for more to be allocated. Once they are being implemented, they will allocate X amount of money for health. Track over the year, is this amount of money being used for health? If it isn't, and if you think somebody is misusing the resources, we're just talking off air about the Ethics and Corruption Commission. It is a shared institution. Go to them and say, I think resources are not being used effectively. Number three, not all of us will get the information that we need for purposes of engaging the devolution process effectively. So I think the few of us who have the information must engage in civic education. We must be able to share that information, because they say information is power. So if you don't have that information, you will be disempowered. So let us engage in that. Let us share that information and let us share it effectively. Number three, let us advocate for our governors to be able to carry out their work effectively. At the end of the day, as citizens, if we do not take devolution as our concern, then 5 years down the road, we'll do what we do every election time. So these leaders are bad, let us elect new ones. And those new ones will do the same thing. We need to keep our leaders in check so that they serve us and not the other way around.
All right. You brought out a very interesting aspect and critical one about priorities. If as a citizen, I feel these are not the priorities for my county, where do I go?
Absolutely. Something else, just to add on what Dr. Odote has said, county governments are required by law to set up what we call service delivery centers, a one-stop shop, where you wake up from your house, you can walk into the village and inquire what's going on about this matter. Again, county governments are required by law to set up a citizen fora at all the decentralized levels, at the constituency level, at the ward level, at the village level, in urban areas and cities, for citizens to engage. And therefore, public participation being a constitutional principle, if a county government makes decisions and as a citizen you feel that your issues were not taken into account, you have the responsibility. You can go to court, and the courts, with the reformed judiciary that we have, some of these decisions can actually be overturned. But the bigger, beyond citizen direct participation in these matters, you can actually recall your elected leaders. The Constitution and the Elections Act allows you to recall county assembly members, for example, even senators, even women representatives, even members. And
what is that process of recalling?
The process is in the law, in the Elections Act, and even in the County Governments Act for county assembly members, men and women. But of course, members of parliament made this very difficult. In fact, the Elections Act, in terms of the procedure for executing a recall, has been made much more difficult, because of course members of parliament did this with self-interest.
Yeah.
First, you cannot recall an elected leader within a period of 2 years, which means for the first 2 years you cannot
do anything really.
But even after 2 years, then you must convince the High Court that they have violated a provision of the Constitution, they have misused resources, or they have violated they have committed an election offense, which means you must have a High Court order. That is when you start collecting signatures, which then you take to the IBC, the Electoral Commission, so that they can do inquiries and then conduct a recall election. So it's fairly difficult, but to see the law, the window is there for recall, at least after 2 years. For governors, you can actually impeach them. You can impeach your governor, and this can be initiated by members of the county assembly. They then make a resolution supported by the majority, 2/3, that do not want the governor. But then, because the Senate protects counties and their interests, the decision of a county assembly to remove a governor must be transmitted to the Senate. And the Senate must review the matter and vote on it. If the Senate upholds the recommendation by the county assembly, that is when the governor is removed, the process of impeaching a governor. So there are those windows for actually...
Quite difficult
windows. Yeah, absolutely. But then again, at very basic level, currently, county governments are constituting their executive committees. They are positions of chief officers. If you are a member, if you are a resident in a county, and you feel you are sufficiently qualified, why don't you offer yourself for these positions? Because they are all competitive and the information is out there in the public domain.
All right, and speaking about members of parliament and self-interest, how badly has, we all know about this tussle of members of parliament and their salaries. How has it affected the whole devolution process, if it has at all?
You know, last week, majority of county assembly members downed their tools, and they downed their tools essentially because of salaries. And I think there are several debates going on at the same time. I think the first debate going on is whether the salaries that MPs are being paid is the correct one or they should be reduced. But number two, the other debate they're raising is whether the process that went on is legal. And for me, there are several things that we need to keep in mind. Number one is the Salaries and Remuneration Commission was established to review and rationalize salaries of public servants. We can debate about the process they went through. We can debate about whether they went through it the right way or not. But the thing that we must admit is that the process of reviewing salaries was always going to be a painful one.
All right.
Because we have a huge public debt that needs to be brought on. And I think that's the context within the debate must be seen. But number two, for me, I think the point that is critical is county assembly members. We also need to ask ourselves as we go on that first, we have new offices at the county level. How are we going to fund those offices? I think that's one debate. But number two, what is the levels of payments that are legitimate for them? Because just looking through the newspapers the whole of last week and this week, you see governors saying that we cannot be able to get qualified professionals because the amount of money that we are setting for them is too low. They cannot go. If you are told Liz today to go and leave your job at the nation, you'll say, no, this is the amount of money you want to pay me, I can't go. So we need to balance between paying people sufficiently vis-a-vis ensuring that we can afford it. I think that's the debate that we must have, and I think we must have it holistically.
Absolutely. Something that the county assembly members are doing which is dangerous, and we must, we have to tell them this. The definition of a county government means the county executive committee and the county assembly. That is the county government. There's a provision in the Constitution and the County Governments Act for suspension of the county government. One reason that the president may suspend a county government, and that means both county assembly and the executive arm, is where services are not being delivered to the people because of paralysis. So as much as we sympathize with the members of the county assembly, given what has been proposed as their remuneration, they must realize that if they cause paralysis in delivery of services, they risk having the county government suspended by the president. And when the county government is suspended for a period of over 90 days, then elections must be held. That is the consequence of causing paralysis because you are boycotting or you are you're not happy with what you're being paid.
All right. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen, for that very insightful discussion on devolution and the structure of the devolved government. Well, we have been speaking to two gentlemen about the devolution process, the structure, how you as a citizen can participate in the whole devolution process. And remember, to learn more and to know more about the devolution process, you could go to the www.knice.go.ke website, as well as you could, if you have any questions, use the Twitter handle at KNice Kenya, and also visit them on their Facebook page, KNice Kenya. Well, thank you very much for your company. It's been a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your night. Liz Ntonjira.
Elewa katiba jenga nchi yako.
in love with you. That she wants you to be her man. Don't deny it anymore, Mr. Simon. I know it. That is exactly why that's why you are so agitated. But I understand you.
No.